But thank you all so much for joining us. Bram Stoker Award winner Cynthia Pelayo will discuss her new horror novel, Vanishing Daughters, in conversation with Bram Stoker Award winner Christopher Golden, who will be discussing his upcoming horror novel, The Nightbirds, in this installment of Author Hour in Massachusetts. So Christopher Golden is the New York Times bestselling and Bram Stoker Award-winning author of All Hallows, Road of Bones, and Snowblind, among many other novels. He is the co-creator of two cult favorite comic book series, Baltimore and Joe Golem Occult Detective. Easy for me to say. He is also the editor of such anthologies as Seize the Night and The New Dead, and he won the Shirley Jackson Award for co-editing The Twisted Book of Shadows, and he lives in Massachusetts. Cynthia Pelayo is the Bram Stoker Award-winning author of Forgotten Sisters, Children of Chicago, and The Shoemaker's Magician. In addition to writing genre-blending novels that incorporate fairy tale, mystery, detective, crime, and horror elements, Cynthia has written numerous short stories, including collection Lotería and the poetry collection Crime Scene. The recipient of the 2021 International Latino Book Award, she holds a Master of Fine Arts in Writing from the School of the Art Institute of Chicago. And she lives in Chicago with her family. So, folks, hopefully I got most of that right. Folks, let's give a big virtual round of applause to Cynthia and Christopher for joining us here tonight. And Cynthia and Christopher, you can take it away. Thanks so much.
Thank you. I just want to say thank you so much, Robert, and thank you to everyone that is joining us this evening. Thank you so much to Christopher Golden. And we're going to get started. And the way I envision the program, Christopher and I are going to talk a little bit about our recent and upcoming releases. We're going to talk about the golden age of horror, a little bit about how we do what we do, and then we'll have some time at the end for questions. So I want to start with Christopher because I literally just finished reading The Nightbirds and the atmosphere. It's like atmosphere all throughout, and I am obsessed with this ship. And so I wanted to see if you wanted to talk to us a little bit about what inspired it, what inspired this ship, because it's really like captivating people, and the characters, of course, and anything else that you wanted to add.
Thank you. I appreciate it. And also I want to thank Robert and everybody who's paying attention out there. And thank you especially, Cynthia, for asking me to join you for this. Yeah. I also want to say I love Robert's voice in his introduction because I expected him to end with "This is Jeopardy!" It felt like it was going to be the Jeopardy introduction. So I really appreciate that. I almost now want trivia questions, but in any case, The Nightbirds is, atmosphere and location are so important to me. They're so important for my ability to get myself into visualizing the story. If I'm writing and I'm trying to figure out how things are moving in a particular scene, I have to close my eyes and sort of see it. And so often I try to create something that is really unique and interesting as a place for the story to unfold. In this case, essentially the Nightbirds came from two ideas. The core idea is about the core idea is about a couple who broke up 18 months or 2 years ago, and we don't really know at the beginning of the book why that happened. We know they loved each other deeply. And at the beginning of the story, she is approached by another young woman who has a baby with her. And essentially, she and the baby are on the run from a sort of sinister group that wants that baby for horrific purposes. Anyway, pretty simple idea, simple setup. But it also came from this idea about two women involved in a coven who fall in love. So that was sort of the gist of it for me. But then the setting came from this idea I ran across online. I love the idea of abandoned places. I'm always looking up places, and there are some really weird ones, some really spooky ones, but also just they're fascinating to me. And there are actually there's a ship or two ships, I can't remember which, off the coast of Australia that in the Nightbirds, it takes place in Galveston, Texas, off the coast of Galveston. It's a 100-year-old, half-sunken, rusted-out freighter ship, and it's been there so long, just off the coast, that a mangrove forest has grown up through the rotted floor of the ship and out through the top of the ship. And I'm just moved it. It's real. It's off the coast of Australia. But never having been to Australia, I knew, I wanted it to be in the U.S. And so there you go. So that's kind of where it started. But I'm going to turn the tables on you, because I said to you before we started that I wanted to talk about place, because not every writer becomes so identified with, or who identifies with, their home the way that you have with Chicago. It's such a core element of your books. So obviously, I think, let's talk a little bit about Vanishing Daughters, but also about Chicago.
About place, yeah. I mean, it's I'll say right now, I'm writing a book that doesn't take place in Chicago, and I have so much anxiety about it because I feel like Chicago's my safety blanket, and I'm writing a book that's a historical horror novel that takes place in 1914 in London. And so I'm a little terrified. So it's a lot of pressure. But Chicago, so Vanishing Daughters follows Briar Rose Thorne, whose mother has recently died, and she returns to their ancestral home, which is a mansion on the south side of Chicago. And if people are familiar with the south side of Chicago, it's this area that's like dotted with these gorgeous mansions. Many of them have been rehabbed. Some of them are dilapidated. This particular one is dilapidated. She's a freelance journalist. Her mother just died. How is she going to maintain this property? It's massive stress at all levels. As she starts researching for an article, she comes upon like a number of unsolved murders within the community, and a serial killer sets his sights on her. And throughout all this, she's having awful dreams of a woman in white begging her to bring her home. And it deals with, of course, the city of Chicago history. I write fairy tale, not adaptations, but my stories are influenced by fairy tales, and this one's influenced by Sleeping Beauty and the folklore of like the Vanishing Hitchhiker, because I'm super fascinated about that reoccurring story that exists all throughout the world. I feel like every single state has a vanishing hitchhiker, and my particular vanishing hitchhiker, I imagine her as stuck in this like existential loop. And so we have to like save her and break that pattern. But Chicago, I think it's because, well, I was born in Puerto Rico and I was raised in Chicago, and I always remember Puerto Rico being a place that we couldn't go back to. And I would always ask, why can't we go back? And my father always saying, this is home. This is your home. You have to accept that this is you. We can never go back to that other place. And so I always knew that there was another place. And that made me sad. I was so fascinated with that. And that there was like this potential identity that I just didn't know. And so I think I just kind of said, well, this is where I'm at. I'm going to love it as much as I can. And I think over time, I came to understand why my parents came to the mainland. The island structurally just has a number of issues with electrical, like all kinds of sorts of structural issues. So I understood why they didn't want to raise children there. And they also wanted us to live the American dream. And I feel like Chicago it's an immigrant city, and it was the place that I felt like allowed my family that opportunity. It was very supportive if you're an immigrant in Chicago, I feel like there were social systems that helped. And so it's my way of telling the city of Chicago, thank you so much for being so nice to my family and allowing them to live that dream for their children. And I'm just fascinated with the city's history. The city, I always remember growing up, every single horror film took place like, it was either really rural or maybe on the coast, and there wasn't a lot in Chicago. And then I saw Candyman, and my world was rocked. And so since then, Chicago's been very important to me.
Yeah, no, that's great. I mean, I think it's so important. Setting, I started to say, I feel like horror writers in general, we have this sort of DNA that loves history, which I know you do. That we have this DNA that loves like mythology and folklore, but also there's the sense of place is just so necessary,
Oh,
which isn't always true for like other genres, but it's very true, I think, for horror.
oh, I agree. I think that's why I'm panicking now, writing something that doesn't take place in Chicago. Uh, I'm having fun doing it, but it's a little scary leaving my home. Uh, I want to go get into like golden age of horror
Yeah.
because there's so much to talk about. Like we can talk about place there too. There's so much. You and I were talking offline about what is going on right now. Like I really feel like we're seeing the golden age of horror, and I think of like, well, what's happening, and it's like great that this is happening, but why horror and why now? Why do you think?
So I think, I mean, I think we can talk about why. I think there are two reasons why now. The first, I think, is that in some kind of perverse, converse way, um, when things are really dark, people like comedy and people like horror. And I
Hmm.
think, because they need to, weirdly, horror as a genre is a very safe place. This is the strangest thing, right? You go into a horror novel and you can have the crap scared out of you, but you can always close the book, right? You always know that there's that distance, no matter how scared you might be reading the book, you get to close it and put it down. And it's a way, I think, to um, process the feelings that we have. Because when we're not in the book, we're
Mhm.
living in a place, in an environment, and a time that is very unstable under our feet, right? And we don't know what's going to happen next. We don't have the ability to close the book on what's going on in the world. And so that's part of it. But from a more sort of practical standpoint, um, we talked about this little bit of history that I would say. So in like 1988, backing up even further. So when Stephen King became Stephen King, he sort of spawned a number of other writers, or other writers had an opportunity to come in and be successful because they were really talented. You had Anne Rice came at the same time, but you had Anne Rice and Peter Straub and Clive Barker and a handful of other people who were actually really good. And horror was hot. But horror was so hot that publishers started to buy a whole lot of really bad books. Writers from other genres got opportunities to write in horror. Those books might have been good, but writers who maybe weren't up to snuff had the opportunity to write novels because the need was there in publishers. And so readers who loved horror started to read books that weren't very good. And they said, maybe I don't like this as much as I thought I did. When horror crashed in like 1990-ish, it kind of went underground. It became the underground genre, but the people who loved it kept doing it. And so for decades, we had this really powerful, thriving small press and indie presses and all of this stuff that allowed people to get really good at what they did. But also, I think one of the reasons horror is so, and we'll talk about this, so diverse right now, is that the barriers that might have been in place at mainstream publishing didn't exist in small press.
Yeah.
And so when the moment came, when horror all of a sudden exploded, sort of Joe Hill and Paul Tremblay and a few other people kind of led the way, and then Stephen Graham Jones, and now we have such a broad, diverse base. I liken it. I'm not a sports guy, but I liken it to having a deep bench in baseball, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So now, when horror took off, instead of the old days when there weren't a whole bunch of talented people just waiting for their shot, we had dozens and dozens of really talented, really diverse writers who were there, so that now the more publishers want to put out horror novels, the more great books there are, and nobody's reading it going, maybe I don't like this as much as I thought I did. Anyway, that's the long sort of my view of how we got to where we are right now.
Yeah, no, I agree. I feel like, and especially with the pandemic, then it was around that time that Stephen Graham Jones, and that same year, like back to back, Stephen Graham Jones released My Heart is a Chainsaw and Sylvia Moreno Garcia with Mexican Gothic. And it was like, they both hit. Didn't they both hit New York Times?
They did. Yeah. And it was like, something's happening here.
Yeah.
Right. And that was a really important moment. Because it showed publishers, it isn't just these couple of guys. Now we can, really, and Victor Laval and Tananarive Due and all of these extraordinary writers. Katrina Ward is taking off big. Josh Mallerman had hit with Bird Box, but then kept going. And so we have these again, you could just literally keep going.
Yeah, no, I agree. I like that image of like, it wasn't just these books that took off. It made people realize, wow, there's this base of writers that are really good, and they're all writing something that's a little different. And you can kind of, a Tananarive Due writer is also a Josh Mallerman writer, and is also a Paul Tremblay writer, a reader. I mean, just because
and a Cynthia Pelayo reader.
Yeah, because we are doing so many different things.
Exactly.
That's another thing that I've noticed, is that there is a base, like you said, but everyone's so different. Like I know a Josh Mallerman book.
Yeah.
Like I don't even need to read the title. Like I know when this is Josh, because
then also like Eric LaRocca has just taken off huge, and so it's just really interesting because, Eric filled a void that nobody realized was there in mainstream readership.
Yes.
Right.
Eric.
Yeah.
Just to touch on Eric, you said it perfectly. He filled this massive void, and I think it made people realize, like, oh, there are people looking for this. And Eric not only did, and I feel like other people, it's not just body horror what Eric is doing. It's just it's multifaceted. But then I also started seeing like this rise of body horror. We've seen this uptick. And I can say that I was because they announced it already. I was on the Lifetime Achievement Committee for the Horror Writers Association for the Lifetime Achievement Award. And I was one of the ones that really pushed for Cronenberg for his award, because I said, look, we wouldn't have I literally said, we wouldn't have an Eric LaRocca if we didn't have a Cronenberg, if we wouldn't have a Gwendolyn Keist who does body horror.
Yeah, and I love her stuff.
Yeah, it's so beautiful. But did you want to talk a little bit about that? The different things that we're seeing? Because
I think it's really interesting, and you should talk about it too, Cynthia, because it's look, a million years ago, and again, so I'm 57 years old. My first novel was published when I was 26, so I've been doing this a long time. And so when I was coming up, I remember reading an interview in Fangoria magazine with Robert R. McCammon, very eloquent guy, who talked about the idea that horror is the most versatile of genres. Yeah. Because within the sort of parameters of what we think of as horror, you can write a science fiction story, you can write a romance story, you can write a Western story, you can write, fantasy, you can write whatever you want to write, literary fiction, like whatever you want it to be or whatever you want to write about, love, death, sex, whatever it is, can all fit within the sort of bounds of what we think of as horror, which I think is why. But another thing is really interesting is for decades, people who loved horror stories, including me, sort of hid in other genres. Oh. Right? You had to sort of, you wanted to do what you wanted to do, but it had to be as a fantasy book, or it had to be as a thriller, or whatever it might be. And now the opposite is happening. right?
Yes.
People who typically write in those genres are writing horror novels because it's hot and it's exciting and it's all of those things. But you can do any kind of book. But the last thing on this topic is I just can't emphasize enough how much of what's exciting about horror right now is exciting because the genre, the publishing within the genre, has a diversity that any other genre pales in comparison.
I agree.
No pun intended.
I I agree, and I remember. So I was a journalist, and journalism doesn't pay. And so then I did market research for like 2 decades. And throughout that, I got my MFA and I wanted to write because I couldn't leave writing. And I just wanted to learn how to do fiction writing. And the famous story goes is that my graduate advisors, when I started writing fiction, they were like, "You're a horror writer who doesn't know who she's a horror writer." I had always been a horror fan, but I hid it because there was a stigma in the 80s and 90s. It's probably all because of the Satanic Panic. And I grew up in a very conservative Catholic household where watching horror was just not okay. I had to hide it. And so when they told me that I was a horror writer, I was like, is this bad? Do I have to like do something else? And it was my advisors were like, no, go for it. Be weird. But when I started like submitting work about like 2010, nobody would, the literary presses were not even answer any of my calls. It was the horror presses that started responding to me. And it was them that started saying, this is interesting. You're not there yet. And it was like literally them that gave me the time of day and gave me direction. And I started getting published short stories with them. And it was indie presses then who started picking me up. Postmortem Press that went under, Raw Dog Screaming Press. My first poetry collection was with Raw Dog Screaming Press in 2012, I think.
But think about that. In what other genre can you have a poetry collection from something called Raw Dog Screaming Press? Right? I mean, this is the thing. This is what I'm talking about that bench, right? I mean, there were like, horror had this minor league system because of the crash, but the passion that I don't think any other genre has or had. And so you were able to do that and to learn and to improve and to get to that point in a way, in a community where people were like, yes, we think that you belong. We think you fit here. Yeah. And you wanting to write this stuff is great, not strange.
And to add to the community, what other genre? This was 2011. Someone told me, I was like, well, what do I do now? And they were like, well, network. And they were like, well, join the Horror Writers Association. So I joined the Horror Writers Association. My appendix burst. And I remember I was being really sick. I was really sick and I had tickets to go to the World Horror Convention. And this is how sick I was. I was on a PICC line. And I just remember telling my doctor, I need to go to this event. And he's like, what? And he's like, well, we'll see where you're at in the next few weeks. And he gave me clearance to travel to World Horror Con. And it's the Bram Stoker Awards. Now it's called StokerCon. So it's the Bram Stoker Awards. I walk in, I don't know anybody. And who invites me to sit at their table? Gillian Flynn and Sam Weller and Douglas Clegg. Where else is at that kind of caliber of people is that going to happen? Gillian went on to do Gone Girl like that next year, and she blew up. Right after the awards, I was with my husband, and I remember Peter Straub won the award that year, and I just remember just like oogling at Peter Straub, and my husband's like, just go say hi, and I was like, he's going to tell me to take a hike. He nudged me. So Peter Straub, I believe, was talking to Joe Hill because Joe Hill was there. And I'm standing there, nobody. And Peter Straub was like, hey, Joe, can you wait a minute? I think she wants to talk to me. Where is this going to happen? And what reality? And he asked me what my name was. I told him I was like just a struggling author, and he's holding a Stoker, and he tells me, you're going to be here one day holding one of these. Where else? In what community, what other literary community could that type of interaction have happened? And so that just is a testament to the horror writing community accepts people that other easily, or maybe is the right word, or is understanding that, hey, you belong with us.
Yeah, I do think it's that underdog thing. I think it's that we're all kind of, I always say to my friends, a rising tide lifts all boats, and we're in this together. But I had that because of the kindnesses that were shown to me by Clive Barker and by John Skipp and Craig Spector. And I'm so glad you brought him up, by Peter, because, and it made me, we were not close, but we were friends for years, and the reason that we never became close is because I was always so intimidated by him not as a person, as a writer. And I'll never forget I met him, I don't know if it was the first time, at HWA weekend in New York in, I think, like 1992. So I was like 20, not even 25 yet, I don't think. And the following year, it was in Hartford, Connecticut. It was like in the middle of a snowstorm. And I'm walking through the lobby, and I see him checking into the hotel. And I kind of glance over because I don't want to be like, and we're, 40 feet away from each other. He's way on the other side of the lobby. But he sees me and he goes, "Hey, Chris." I could have fainted. I could have fallen down. And that was just one of many kindnesses he showed me over the years. He was just incredible. And again, and it's one thing, you learn, and I see you doing it now. And I tried to, a big part of it for me was my friend Rick Howdle, who passed away years ago now, unfortunately, very quietly mentored a lot of writers. And while I'd always tried to pass along work and things like that, and to say, and to encourage people, and like, if I was offered something I couldn't do, I would try to pass it along. I don't want to list people because it's their business that they got work that I sent to them. But it was really when Rick died, and I was like, oh, I now have to step up my game as far as mentoring and weaving community. So that's why I created the Merrimack Valley Halloween Book Festival, and like all these and writing retreats and stuff like that, because with Rick's passing, I was like, oh, I'm the next generation.
Yeah.
But you're right. I just feel like, that's what we do. And, I want to shout out to the person who I think is really picking that up the most that I can see, is Gabino Iglesias.
Yeah.
Not only a phenomenal writer that we should have mentioned in the context of the stuff we were talking about before, but I think just like a phenomenal community builder for the genre.
Yeah, it's work that we take on because we know that someone did it for us. And so I've worked with one of my mentees is nominated for first novel this year, Jenny. I can never say her last name. Kiefer.
Yes.
Jenny Kiefer. I remember reading This Wretched Valley, and nobody wanted this. So I was doing pitch wars. I was part of pitch wars, and I remember hearing about this manuscript making its way around, and all the other mentors were like, well, there's this horror manuscript, and I don't like the beginning because the beginning says what happens and it spoils it. And I was like, I want that book right now. I read the first paragraph and I was like, this is my mentee. I am working with this person. And we made some changes to it. We kept that. We made some changes to the manuscript. Within, I think, days, she got an agent. Within 2 weeks, I want to say, she sold her book to Quirk.
Wow.
Within
That's
2
great. And she's really good. I was so happy to see the list of first novel. Am I right in saying it's all women?
It's all women, I believe. Yeah.
All 5 nominees for first novel this year. The Stokers are women. And I was so happy, excited, because I blurbed 3 of those books pre-pub.
Oh,
and I especially Jenny's book I love, and I think she's terrific. I also want to shout out Monica Kim. The
That,
Eyes Are the Best Part. I really went to bat on that book because it's something I haven't read before,
God.
right? And this is why I keep harping on the diversity of horror. Like, this is the best thing because, like, it's a book about a young, and I'm not giving anything away. It's a book about a young Korean American woman who becomes obsessed with eating human eyeballs, right? Um, I had not read that book before, and it was great. So that's the stuff, that gets me excited when I find something like that.
Yeah, and it's I mean they're all like young women and they're just doing really different things, very different things. Like even structurally, like Jenny's book begins with telling you how everybody died, and then we get into the book. Monica, we talk about eating eyeballs, and so horror. That's I think just kind of like going back to the beginning. This is why we're seeing this golden age of horror because these stories are stories that have never been told before. There's a lot of underlying, and they're complex, what these people are doing. There's
Absolutely.
a lot of underlying themes and characters and even like structural, even not just like the new writers, but like Paul Tremblay with horror movie, including the screenplay in the book.
Horror movie. Let's talk about this too, because I want you to tell me. Let me say this, and then I want you to respond because I don't get scared reading books. Almost never. I don't usually even get a little chill up my back. I read it because I love it, but I don't. It's very hard to scare somebody with words on a page. The ending of Horror Movie did it.
It was
Horror
good.
Movie is my favorite book by Paul. I know it's like, some people hate the structure of it. I love it. I think it's a masterpiece. Um, but scare wise, I'd love to know what books, like if you've read something that scares you, because only two books have ever scared me as an adult. One was The Grin of the Dark by Ramsey Campbell, and the
Oh.
other is Incidents Around the House by Josh Mallerman, which scared the crap out of me.
So before incidents, it was Bird Box.
Okay.
And there was a particular scene, like when the first scene, okay, so yeah, so in Bird Box scared, like I've never had to like, because I was reading with the book light, and I've never had to get up and just like, I'm just going to turn the light on in the bedroom. I had to do that with Bird Box. It scared me, and just the existential dread. There was a scene in Max Booth's We Need to Know, what was it? We Need to Know Something. There was this creepy scene in there with a dog that scared me, but it was definitely Bird Box and Incidents Around the House, and that's why and horror movie. I agree with that ending, and that's just why they're both nominated for superior achievement. The Incidents Around the House and horror movie, and then honestly before that, it wasn't since like Exorcist.
Yeah.
It was like, and and maybe like again like Legion with the detective interviewing, the possessed in the asylum, but that was like a little unsettling. But for the most part, I don't get scared. So you're right. It takes a lot of skill to really create this like anxiety filled, panicky feeling. But yeah, Bird Box, that's the
Well, that's exactly it, right? Because first you have to make people feel uneasy, and then you have to make them feel like they're like in danger. And to
yeah.
make somebody feel like they're in danger from words on a page is very, very, very hard. And the more you know, the more you write, and the more you know the tricks of writing, the harder
Oh,
it is to be scared by a book. Um, the other book I wanted to mention, and then I know you have other things you want to talk about, is I just recently finished what I think is maybe one of the best novels I've ever read, which is Looking Glass Sound by Katrina Ward.
oh,
Which, if you haven't read it, you talk about playing with structure, like Paul does in Horror Movie.
Trina
I
Ward.
think it's a masterpiece, and I'm just going to throw that out there. But a lot, and again, your mileage may vary, but that's my.
I absolutely love her work. She's like definitely one of my favorite. I haven't read Looking Glass Sound, but she's definitely one of my favorite authors because she just does like she just does like these fantastic things. Another favorite of mine is gonna be Gwendolyn Kais. I love anything that Gwendolyn Kais does.
Yeah.
I just love
The
her
Haunting
writing.
of Belkwood was
Cool.
so good.
Yeah, it's just so what are you looking forward to reading next? What haven't you read that you're looking forward to reading?
Well, you know, the hard thing is that like you get so many books, people asking you to read for blurbs that getting around to like I just read Looking Glass Sound, even though I've had it here since it came out, you know, so that's the thing. Fortunately, I've in the last 2 years I've read a lot of really great books for blurbs, but it is hard to sort of get around to the thing you want to read next. I've got a lot of stuff on the to be read shelf back there. I'm going to reread Clive Barker's Books of Blood. That's one of my things that I want to do this year. And I don't know. I mean, there's a lot of stuff. I mean, Joe Hill's new King Sorrow, which is looks about it's ridiculously long, you know.
And there's
what are you excited to read next?
So I love I haven't got into it, but I love Mariana Enriquez. So this is my next A Sunny Place for Shady People. Have you? I don't. It's just
no. And you know what? Now that you've said that, I still have. Is it called Our Share of the Night? Or something?
Our Share of the Night. Yes.
I haven't read it yet, and it's on my immediate yes. So I've got to read that. I think I'll read that the next time I'm done with blurbing.
Yeah. So this one, please let me know what you think. I love this book. So
well, you know, Paul Tremblay was like, you must read this, and so it's very high up on my list. In fact, I think I'll pull it out, and I think I have two more books to read for blurbs here. So I'll as soon as I get done with those, I'll read that.
Joe, before we move on, I need to say Joe Hill. I read the synopsis. This is another book that's doing something completely different with horror. There's dragons in this.
Yeah, I don't know anything about it, except that I know he's been working on it for a while, and I know he's excited, and that's the best thing about it is he's really excited about it. The other thing, by the way, that everyone should be looking forward to that you have not read yet, although you're in it, is The End of the World as We Know It, New Tales from Stephen King's The Stand.
You don't have it any galleys. There's no.
Yeah, no, they're playing it very close to the vest, but you know, I guess you know this already, but I'll say Brian Keene and I were blown away that when I asked Stephen King if we could create an anthology in the world of The Stand, his response was 2 words: do it.
Wow.
And
that's awesome.
And so we've done this thing with 34 stories by 36 different writers, including you. You did a wonderful story for the book, and it's massive. There you go. It's just as big as The Stand itself, and I can't wait for people. The thing about them not really putting out galleys is that I'm craving like people to read it. I want people to. I love sharing the things that I'm passionate about. I can't wait for people to dig in, and I think at some point, you know, I can't wait for you to read them all. And
it's going to be this is going to be the summer event. I think I feel like it's the calm before the storm, because once this is out in the world, it's just going to be. I guarantee part of the cultural conversation.
I hope so. Yeah. I hope so. The book, I have to say, I think that when Brian and I, talked about it, and then when I emailed him to ask him, I didn't really think about what I was really asking and how much anxiety Brian and I would both feel about whether or not he liked it.
Oh.
Because once we delivered it and we were waiting because we knew he was going to read it, just like the terror of like, what if we disappointed him?
Oh,
But fortunately, he loved it, and
we love it. It's out in the world in a few months in
yeah,
August.
in end of August. Yeah, can't wait.
Well, thank you so much for inviting me to be a part of it. The ending of my story is the ending after a conversation with, because I struggled. I was just like, you're asking me to do what? Like, do you know the anxiety that I'm going
Yeah.
to be living with? Like, it was like, like what you said, it's fear because
Mhm.
this is beyond pressure. And I didn't know how to end my story. And I think you and I went back and forth a little bit. And I was like, I got it. Thank you. And so you were like an amazing editor, and you got me to the end. And I'm really happy with the end of that piece.
It's got, again, no spoilers because I want people to be completely taken by surprise by everything in it and the wild variations that happen within the anthology. I can't wait.
Yeah. Well, we have a couple more minutes before we take questions. I think we'll I want to ask you a couple of craft questions.
Yeah, and encourage people, post questions if you have them.
Questions, and then we'll get to them after
Yeah,
this. I
sure.
did see there was writers in the audience. So I want to know, you've had like this impressive career that is still, and you're still you deliver books at a pretty steady pace, which is amazing. How do you keep the momentum going?
Um, I quit my excellent job in 1992 when I sold my first book, and I didn't have a mortgage at the time, and I didn't have kids at the time. But not too long after that, I got a mortgage and kids, and it's very easy to make sure that you have income when your children and your house, your shelter rely upon you producing. So there's no magic to it in that sense. On the other hand, I will say that for me, for someone who has been sort of, they used to call this section, the section in the sort of middle of the sales charts, the mid list. There isn't really much of a mid list anymore in publishing. But if you want to survive in the mid list, which is where I still kind of feel I am, then you have to diversify. And fortunately, I love so many different kinds of storytelling that from the very early days of my career, I broke into the comics field and I wrote comic books, and I've written video games and comics and screenplays, and I'm writing a screenplay right now that probably will be announced tomorrow for based on a novel of mine. And so basically, like my whole career, I've just been focused on. That's not a craft question; it's a business question for me. But as far as that's concerned, I don't believe in writer's block. I think writer's block, if I get anything related to it, I'll get up and I'll walk around and I'll go check the mail and I'll, do something else for an hour, like whatever it is, and then I'll get back to work because
It's work.
I believe writer's block is a luxury that I can't afford.
That's excellent. That's absolutely excellent advice, and I feel like I needed to hear that. And and hopefully the other writers that are in the audience heard that as well. That it's a business as well. It's part of producing in order to pay our bills. I am doing this full time as well, which is very scary. I could have gone back and stayed in research, and I decided, well, at least right now, I physically could not even take a day job because of the amount of deadlines I'm under. And so right now, it's like I have to deliver all of these things that I'm contractually obligated to turn around. It's a very different way of, for somebody who's been in corporate America for 2 decades, it's a very different way of living. I have to create my own schedule. I have to make sure I'm writing. And it's scary.
But in a weird way, it helps too, because, you're not only responsible to you, you're responsible to your family too.
Yeah.
I've always taken that very seriously, and again, there are times I work very hard. I don't make any secret of it. I'm involved in all kinds of different things, but I also give all of those things my all, and do my best with it.
No, this was great. Thank you so
Thank
much.
you.
Yeah. So I think we're going to open it up to audience questions. Robert, what do you recommend?
Yeah. So I don't mind facilitating. I have
Yeah.
a couple of questions of my own first before we get to the audience, though, given the number of audience questions we have so far. So my first question to both of you is, why do you think people want to be scared?
As somebody that has anxiety, like diagnosed with anxiety, at least for me, it's a nice way to process the scary thing without actually having to be in the scary thing. So I think that's what I've been told by many people, that it helps them with their anxiety.
I think that's true. I have a couple of things to add, which is, you know, research has legitimately shown that horror and comedy are sister genres in the sense that both things create a heightened level of emotion after which you feel relief. You feel there's a physical effect after you have been really scared or laughed a lot, and it's really comforting in that regard. But also for me, I am an atheist. I call myself a Christian atheist because I believe in the things that I was taught growing up as far as how we should behave in the world, but I don't believe that there's a God. However, I would like to believe in some kind of spiritual element, some kind of spiritual world, something greater than us. And so I think that supernatural horror stories create a moment of suspension of disbelief where if I can believe in demons and evil with the capital E, then I can believe in angels and goodness and I can believe that a ghost could be evil, but also could be, or another ghost might be helpful and looking out for you and things like that. And that's it's a comfort, even though on the higher level I don't believe it. Supernatural stories give me that sense of magic that I think I crave. So that's me.
I love that.
Christopher, you had mentioned earlier that only maybe twice in your life were you genuinely scared when reading a book. A book scared you. So a follow-up question to that for both of you: have you ever scared yourself while writing something?
Oh, I wrote a serial killer for Vanishing Daughters, and I had to finish those chapters as fast as possible because I was very unnerved by writing a serial killer perspective.
I wrote a short story called The Abduction Door, which has some scenes in it that are really scary. Or not maybe scary, but disturbing. And I don't think I was ever scared while writing it, but I will tell you that when I finished writing it, I had this really sort of sinister sense of satisfaction because I knew the impact that the story was going to have on certain people who read it. And I don't usually get that. I'm usually very unhappy as a writer, like, with my output, with what I've done until I beat it up 1,000 times. So this one, as soon as I finished writing it, I was like, I just grinned like an idiot because I was so pleased with the evil involved.
Wait, I have to ask. I didn't ask. How long does it take you to write a novel?
Novel. I mean, my first novel took 4.5 years. My second novel took me 9 months. I used to write much faster than I write now. I'm doing like one novel a year now, but I'm also working on 1,000 other things. So really, it takes me about 6 months.
Yeah, that was a question from Susan in the chat. What about you, Cynthia? How long does it generally take you to write a book?
I can have what I call my zero draft in about 3 months, but it's like nobody's ever going to see it, and it's just like everything's dumped in there, typos. It looks like stage directions in the screenplay, and then that I can get that down in about 3 months, and then from there, I layer. So in about 6 months, I'm really happy with where I'm at.
A related question from Larry: do either of you set goals in terms of the number of words you wish to write per day?
Yeah, right now because I'm under contract with a few projects, I have to hit certain word count to get to where I need to get to.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, I think it depends on what my schedule looks like and what the project is that we're talking about. I used to try to do, you know, once upon a time, uh, on a deadline, I would try to do like 3,000 words a day, which is a lot. Not for me. For some people, it's not. Um, and now, I'm depending on what I'm working on. It could be 1,500, 2,000 words a day. Um, but also now I split my time up. Sometimes I'm 2 days a week, or mornings I'll work on one thing, and then the other days of the week or the afternoons I'll work on a novel. It just depends on how I'm juggling at that given time.
Now, Christopher, you said it's easy to publish books when your family's depending on the income there.
I didn't say it
Chris,
was easy to publish them.
oh, okay, right. Okay,
Yeah.
good point. Yeah,
Yes.
but it's motivation, right? So
Yes.
Christine asks, when are you the hardest to live with? When you are writing, when you are editing, or when you are in between books?
In between books, I'm a mother effing delight, is what I am. Uh, when I'm writing, I do a lot of my editing as I go. By the time I'm finished with a quote unquote first draft, it's really more like a fourth draft. Um, and I think that's probably the time when I'm not as, uh, I'm kind of gone, mentally I'm off with the fairies, they used to say. So I'm not really as engaged as I am otherwise. When I'm editing, when I'm writing comics, when I'm between books, when I'm even working on a screenplay, very different mentally than writing a novel. What about you, Cynthia?
When I'm writing poetry, because I'm also a poet, so everybody in the house knows when the poet is on, and it's like, leave the poet. She's somewhere else. She's not even here.
Yeah, that's
There you
great.
go. Michelle asks, do you ever get inspiration or ideas from your dreams or from your nightmares?
There is a character in Vanishing Daughters that is from a dream. And I never typically have super vivid dreams, but there's this character that was stood out to me, and he is in Vanishing Daughters.
Um, I did a horror series, a YA horror series some years ago called Prowlers, and in one of those books, I recreated the most terrifying nightmare I've ever had, which I won't elaborate on right now because it's sort of a long description, but that was an inspiration. And also, I don't typically incorporate that stuff, but the first like sort of 4 chapters or so of my novel Wildwood Road is all a dream that I had. But other than that, I mean, I've written a lot, and it's very rare for me to do that.
Nicholas wants to know, can you tell us a bit about what your outlining process is like?
So, funny story. I usually have a very detailed outline that I build it in Excel. And that's worked for my last few books, and it's not working for this book. And so that's just taught me. I remember Chuck Wendig said something to that effect, that what works for one book might not work for another book. So I have a very different outlining process, and it's more of a pantsing bullet point process for this book.
Yeah, I it's different for me from project to project, but novels typically, I've written the thing that persuades my editor that this is a good idea, which is an outline, but it leaves a lot of room for me to sort of breathe and expand. And then what happens is once I am started, there's a running, as you said, bullet points. There's a sort of running list of ideas and plot points and realizations that are the tail end of the manuscript. So as I'm going, I'm sort of constantly referring to and incorporating things and weaving them back in and all of that. But when I collaborate on a novel, which I haven't done in a while, but when I collaborate on a novel, usually there's a um, much more specific, much more laid out outline, sort of scene by scene, usually, or at least chapter by chapter, so that the people who are collaborating, my collaborator and I, have agreed on the structure and form of the thing. We may change it as we go, but we have a much better plan than I typically do when I'm going in on my own.
Yeah. So as we start to wind down, so Cynthia, Vanishing Daughters was published last month. What is next for Cynthia? What are you working on now?
What's upcoming? I have Lotería is being re-released, and The Children of Chicago, The Shoemaker's Magician. Those 3 books will be re-released this year, and I am working on a million things right now that are all due.
Yeah,
I hear you. And speaking of Christopher, so Christopher, we know The Nightbirds is being published next month.
Yep.
And then I was looking it up. The short story is about The Stand, The End of the World as We Know It. That's coming out in August. What else is? I guess there's some big news dropping tomorrow. What else is going on with you, Christopher?
Well, let's see. I'm always working on several different comic books at any given time, usually with Mike Mignola. The new issue of Hellboy in Love was just announced today. Bunch of other stuff. Let's see. I'm 2/3 of the way through my next novel, which will be out next year. And most importantly, well, not most importantly, but right now, most importantly is I'm working on a screenplay for the adaptation of a novel of mine that I think will be announced tomorrow. And who the producer is, still shaking my head. I can't even believe it. But also last week or the week before, we announced that my novel Road of Bones is being adapted by Scott Derrickson and C. Robert Cargill for Screen Gems at Sony, with Scott Derrickson directing the script by the 2 of them and them producing along with me. And actually hasn't been announced yet, but I'm also producing a potential TV series based on a novel by a friend. And I can't really say more than that, but it's really fun to be in that side of things as well. So
phenomenal. That's wonderful. Both of you. It's amazing. Chris, did you want to take 30 seconds and plug the Merrimack Valley Halloween Book Festival?
Listen, I fortunately, my friend Melissa Sherlin, who may still be in here, she was in here, has been running it the last few years, and she has been absolutely phenomenal. The best thing that a friend can do when you hand them over a bunch of work is to keep you out of it completely, and that's what she has done, and I couldn't be more grateful to her for that. But last year was incredible. I'm sure this year will be no less incredible. I think it's the 17th of October this year. I can't remember. In Haverhill, Massachusetts, the Haverhill Public Library. Always dozens of incredible authors, mostly horror, but not all. And Cynthia has been there. And I'm just, and also just to take a moment before we wrap to just say how much I admire your work, Cynthia, but also the work that you are doing, that we talked about, the work that you're doing for your community and for the community of writers and all of that. I think it's so important, and I know a lot of writers are looking up to you, and I think it's great.
Thank you. Thank you. I appreciate that. Thank you so much, Chris, for everything. Thank you for joining me tonight. This was a lot of fun. I feel like we could have kept talking about all these books.
I know. Well, that's the best part.
Yeah.
To talk about the things that excite us. So.
Yeah.
So, folks, let's give Cynthia and Christopher a big virtual round of applause for a wonderful conversation. For those watching live, look for an email from me later tonight with a link to the recording and links to Wellesley Books. And for those also watching live, please fill out the feedback survey when you exit the Zoom. So thank you so much, Cynthia. Thank you so much, Christopher. I hope you both.
Thank you.
I wish you both the best of luck with continued success with all your works. And I hope everyone has a great rest of their night.
You too. Thank you.
Bye.